Very excited now to be joined by Ben Smith. He's the editor-in-chief of Semaphore and the host of the Mixed Signals podcast, which everybody should go and subscribe to. Good to see you, Ben. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Ben, you wrote a fantastic story here, a very undernoted, in my opinion, of the U.S.-China dynamic, which I think really hit the nail on the head. I've been involved in the space now for quite some time. Let's put this up here on the screen. Here's what you write. You talk specifically about how Trump is poised to end Washington's decade of the China hawks. First of all, why don't you just tell us some of the things that you noted with the trade deal that's now taking form, President Trump and President Xi scheduled to meet sometime in the next 48 hours or so, I believe, in South Korea. But why is Trump, who ushered in the decade of the China hawks, also the one poised to end it? What did you find?
Yeah, I mean, Trump ran in 2016 on, a huge part of that campaign. A huge part of his whole public career has been saying that when, China joined the WTO in the early 2000s, that was, the beginning of the end for American manufacturing and thus the beginning of the end for kind of America as we knew it and loved it. That was the original sin. And we have to totally remake the U.S. relationship with China, which really means remaking the whole world, for which China has been, has basically so much of global manufacturing has shifted to China, and I think and and that came with a certain amount at times of, and we have to prepare to fight a war with them over Taiwan. And they're spying on us. And we have to throw out all their students, and there's a lot of very tough talk from him, and there was a group of very hardcore anti-China people who, by the way, have been around forever. This is an old American debate. There's an old "who lost China" debate. Very intense support for Taiwan here for since Henry Luce was running Time magazine. But they but basically, I think what we've seen over the last 2 weeks is that thing that has basically hit a dead end.
Yep.
The most hawkish advisors to Trump are out this term. Like a guy named Matt Pottinger, former Wall Street Journal reporter, and Trump is looking to make a deal that is basically going to restore the status quo ante. Like he's going to drop the fentanyl tariffs, and the stuff that ultimately felt kind of made up is now going away in exchange for making tariffs go away. And the notion that we're going to remake the world economy into one where like all the dirt processing plants relocate to the US and, China goes back to, 1973 just does not seem like it's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And was there a way you think that the Hawks could have played their cards better, that if Trump had approached the tariff conflict differently? It seems like it was destined to fail by the way that he rolled it out, attacking the entire world at the same time. Everybody gets these like arbitrary tariffs, and we're going to put tariffs on things that we can't make here in the United States. And China's response at the time seemed to be, okay, well, we're not going to buy any soybeans, and we're just going to wait you out because this is incoherent and it's not going to work. But it feels like we do have a lot of power. Like something could have worked. Like where did they go wrong here?
Yeah, ironically, the thing that if you really wanted to do your best to damage the Chinese economy and kind of contain their technological development, you'd probably do what the Biden administration did, which was basically blockade certain key technologies and get the Europeans to do it too.
Mm-hmm,
and
which is what we were doing.
Also, by the way, not buy their superior electric vehicles and force Americans to purchase inferior Ford electric vehicles, which the Europeans had been doing. Looks like now the Canadians are just going to go and buy Chinese vehicles. I mean, the Europeans surprisingly are really kind of much more inclined to take a anti-China stance, I think, than a lot of people here expect, because for them the biggest issue is the war in Ukraine, and China's on the wrong side of it.
Yep. That's very important to note. I mean, one of the things, Ben, that like I said, I've been in this space for a long time, kind of followed the discourse. What I noticed was that 8 to 10 years ago in the China hawk space, it seemed achievable. The idea of decoupling, the idea of industrialization. I mean, you and I have been around for a while. How many times have we heard about industrial policy? It's a bipartisan thing. It's 2025 now. The Made in China 2025 plan actually did come true. I was just looking at their original goals from 2015 to 2025. They mostly accomplished all of them. If you compare the rhetoric of the industrial policy, how we're going to decouple from China, the progress of the CHIPS Act here in the US, almost none of that has actually materialized and is not really on its way to doing so. If anything, a lot of it is being cut by the one big beautiful bill. So in material terms, it seems to me that the playing field itself is just different now because we didn't do any of the requisite things that would have been able to be done to actually have some grand decoupling in the way that Steve Bannon envisioned in 2016.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, if you'd hung around Congress 5 or 10 years ago and you saw Mike Gallagher, this Wisconsin congressman chairing the China committee, kind of and building this bipartisan consensus that it was just time for a radical break with China, a radical reshaping of that relationship. And with the support of a lot of Democrats, including very senior people in the Biden White House, you would have been plausible to think that that was going to happen. And it has absolutely not happened. I mean, I do think one of the things that this administration has come up to face is basically, do we want to try to beat the Chinese at their own game, which is sort of scaled domestic manufacturing of very, very low margin goods. And when you talk about rare earths, what that is massive, massive plants processing dirt. And I think, we've sort of walked up to that, and it doesn't seem like there's a huge appetite to do that here, as opposed to very, very high margin service exports in AI, in all sorts of digital services where the US is really totally dominating the world. And I think it's been sort of the notion that like the right strategy for the U.S. is to try to beat China at its game rather than at our game, does ultimately, I think, give people pause.
Yeah.
And let me put another idea to you, and you tell me if you think it's totally crazy. In the 1990s, when there was this push for permanent normal trade relations with China, and then eventually letting them into the WTO, the idea that was presented to the American public and to the global public was that opening up the Chinese economy would also, step 2, step 3, open up democracy and open China up politically, that they would see the virtues of this Western liberal system and they would adopt it. What seems to have happened is that the contagion went the other way. So we seem to be adopting their system. Like the two systems saw each other, and the leaders of this country, particularly Trump at this point, looked in the Chinese mirror and were like, oh, wow, this is interesting. I like the way that they dictate corporate policy by telling which companies that can merge with other companies. Like they're now out publicly saying that who they want Warner Brothers to merge with. When it comes to TikTok, they're like, oh, this is pretty cool, and so we're just going to have a state-run TikTok, and my friend Larry Ellison will be the one that will run it, and he'll design an algorithm that will work. Well, China can do their version of TikTok over there, and we're going to buy 10% of this company. We're going to buy 10% of this company. So it really feels like the analysts were correct that the merging of the two systems would persuade one of them to adopt the others, but they had the direction wrong. Am I crazy here, or are we witnessing?
You're referring to what do they call it? State capitalism with American characteristics.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is superficially true. I mean, the difference is that the Chinese government, because it's a communist dictatorship, is able to make extremely long-term bets and stick to them, and so and sometimes with massive success, like the kind of infrastructure behind this kind of massively scaled industrial policy, whereas the U.S. on things like cars is changing its strategy so frequently that it's really destroying the domestic auto industry. Like it's just very, very, maybe there's some future where people are driving using internal combustion engines. And if the US had kind of made that counterintuitive bet and stuck with it, we'd be the ones selling those cars, or at least but instead the country has sort of flip-flopped a few times, and just, it's very hard. If you're running Ford or General Motors, it's just very, very hard to be competitive. And then the problem, of course, with being a communist dictatorship is you can't correct. And things like the one-child policy, which has created this horrific and was both incredibly inhumane and created this horrible demographic crisis, are also a product of the same thing. So I'm not sure like we should act. There is a moment right now. I feel like people are watching like videos on TikTok of Chinese like iPhone stores that have cars in them and getting really excited. But it's not like things are not going great there necessarily.
I don't know. I mean, things aren't great here either. So that's what causes people like me. Like, it seems clean, it's safe, and it's nice. You know,
I was in Chengdu over the summer and with my kids, and they were just like, "Oh my God, we're so cooked." But I'm not sure it's that simple.
Yeah, of course, it never is entirely.
At least we have our freedoms here, right?
All right, Ryan. We'll
that sounds like a nervous laugh.
Yeah. Ben, my last question here is on the security doctrine, because key to the industrial side of all of this was always the Taiwan question. Strategic ambiguity, according to a White House official, is officially here to stay. Trump technically said he was going to talk to President Xi maybe about Taiwan sometime today, but even the discussion around Taiwan today seems very different than it was 10 years ago when there was an ironclad. I mean, frankly, even Biden said, I would defend Taiwan. He almost changed the strategic ambiguity policy. It doesn't seem like that is nearly as clear as it is today in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, Trump is sort of an everything's on the table deal maker. And so there's this slight sense that, wait, does that include Taiwan? And the U.S. just demonstrably in our domestic politics don't have a big appetite to fight foreign wars. I mean, I don't think there's something has radically changed, but the strategic ambiguity has shifted a little in the direction of the U.S. wouldn't engage. But although Trump, I think, is unpredictable enough that in some way he maintained, like, there's just a level of ambiguity right there that, I don't know, that a lot of people think will deter the Chinese from sort of opportunistically starting a war.
Yeah. I don't know. Allowing the creation of this semiconductor industry in this island right off the Chinese coast seems to be not working out as well as planned.
Backfired a little bit.
It is, does that essentially require the U.S. to maintain some stable relationship? I mean, because if it does go the way that we're thinking, and there's some kind of mostly peaceful takeover of Taiwan, the American economy is then that much more in hock.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. economy is so profoundly dependent on many, many different things happening in China, and their kind of just expression the other week, it was really pretty breathtaking to say any item made with these minerals that we mine, we get to control the use with a kind of global long arm forever. And don't worry, we'll issue permits swiftly. Like that's, they have a lot of power of the global economy. That's part of, I think, why the U.S. climbed down. The chips are part of it. Our sort of announcement that we're going to reclaim the chip industry and our attempts to cut them off from chip manufacturing do not actually really seem to yet have created a booming American chip industry, but have created very strong incentives for China to build its own competitive domestic chip industry. And now the Trump administration has decided, like, wait a second, the real way to prevent them from doing that is to sell them the NVIDIA chips that we were blockading. And it is another instance where I think these are all rational decisions. Like, these are smart people making very difficult policy choices, but flipping between, the U.S. strategy has really been defined by flipping between them.
I think that's really well said. Everybody go and subscribe to Ben's podcast. Ben, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Nice to see you.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.